Hello Daily Drafters and welcome to the Modern Horizons 3 pre-release guide here on the channel designed to get you ready for your pre-release events this weekend. This video will be full of useful information for beginners to seasoned veterans, whether this will be your first ever pre-release or if you're looking for Modern Horizons 3 specific information, such as a rundown on returning mechanics, limited archetypes, and more to make sure you're on top of your game at your LGS. So whether you're new here or you've been here a while, stay tuned for the ultimate guide in helping you crush your Modern Horizons 3 pre-release. Before we break down what exactly a pre-release is, some of you might be asking why I am covering a traditionally supplemental set like Modern Horizons 3 as a normal standard set here on the channel, and the reason is, for those of you that don't know, Modern Horizons 3 will be available to be drafted on MTG Arena, the first of these master sets to make such a claim. Now, some of you might be asking yourself, what exactly is a pre-release? Well, each year there are roughly 4 main set releases of Magic the Gathering products, and most local game stores run what is called a pre-release for each of these main set releases. Essentially, you battle it out against your friends and strangers using several booster packs of the brand new cards for the upcoming set that has yet to be released, hence the name pre-release. If this sounds interesting to you, let's take a step-by-step look at how exactly these events are run. Step 1. Locate your local game store. In order to participate in a pre-release event, you'll need to find one. If you do not already have a local game store that you frequent, I've included a link in the description to a website that will help you find a game store running a pre-release event near you. Now that you've found where you'll be participating, it's time to get registered. Usually stores will run events all weekend, maybe one on Friday, 2 on Saturday, and 1 on Sunday. Check with your LGS to see when the events are happening and which ones you would like to attend. Be sure to note that sometimes these events fill up fast, so you may need to pre-register to ensure you have a spot. It just depends on your store. Other times you can just walk in and register on the spot. Be sure to find out what is best for your situation. Now that you're registered, it's time for the fun part. When it's time to start the event, you will get handed a pre-release kit like the ones on your screen now. For this set, there is only one pre-release kit that you can receive. In other sets, sometimes you have a choice, but for Modern Horizons 3, we've got just the one. Now that you've got your kit, when the event begins, you'll be instructed to open your kit and begin your deck build. It varies from store to store, but usually you will have about 50 minutes or so to build your deck and get ready for your matches. Let's take a look at what you'll find when you open your kit. Inside, you will find one traditional foil rare or mythic rare from Modern Horizons 3 with a year stamp, and here's an example of what that card might look like using a rare from the last set, Outlaws of Thunder Junction. 6 Modern Horizons 3 play boosters, 1 20-sided spin down die, and 1 MTG Arena code card. As many of you may be aware, draft boosters are now a thing of the past and were replaced with play boosters in the last couple of sets. This certainly threw a wrench in things when it came to drafting Karlov Manor and Thunder Junction, so I wanted to break down what Modern Horizons 3 will look like. Shockingly, this might actually be the simplest explanation we've had in a couple of years when it comes to the details of the set, but we really only have one singular 261 card set on our hands. Now, there's a couple of nuances that I'll go through here next, but when it comes down to it, there's only a couple of bonus cards, but no real bonus sheets to concern ourselves with this time around. Every Modern Horizons 3 play booster will contain a variation on the following: 6 commons from the main set, and 2% of the time, one of these 6 commons will be replaced by a special guest, of which there are these 10 for this set, visible on your screen now. 3 uncommons from the main set, 1 rare or mythic from the main set. Now, I mentioned there aren't any bonus sheets for this set, but this next slot will act very similarly to a bonus sheet for Modern Horizons 3. This next slot is guaranteed to be one of 20 uncommon, 18 rare, and 4 mythic rares from the main set that are new to Modern. These cards are all reprints from the Commander and Legacy formats that will now be legal in Modern thanks to this set. So this is effectively a sheet of 42 cards that will have a slot of its own in every Modern Horizons 3 play booster. I've displayed a list of these 42 cards on your screen now if you'd like to pause the video and check them all out. You'll also get 1 non-foil wild card of any rarity from the main set, but it will be a rare or mythic only 8% of the time. 1 foil card of any rarity from the main set, including the new to Modern cards, and the final slot will be a basic land card 50% of the time, and it will be another common card the other 50% of the time. As confusing as all of that might have seemed, it's actually much more simple than it has been in the last several sets. One last thing before we build our decks, pre-release events usually have a cost of somewhere around $30 to enter in the new Play Booster era. Sometimes you can get lucky and find one still charging $25, or maybe your LGS charges $35, but it's usually in that range. Now, this set, unfortunately, does come with a higher price tag. This is likely because these cards are printed with the modern format in mind, a more powerful format than standard, and therefore the cards are likely to be more powerful and more expensive as a result. Do not be shocked to see the sticker price for these events reach $60 or even $70. Alright, we now have everything we need to begin our deck build. If you'd like to see an example of a Modern Horizons 3 sealed deck build, stick around until the final segment of this video, timestamped below, where I will build an entire sealed deck on screen for you to follow along with. After you've built your deck, you will then be assigned an opponent by the event coordinator, and you will play out your first match. Different stores will give you different amounts of matches for the event, but usually it's a minimum of 3. Sometimes you might get lucky and be able to play 4 or more, it just depends. After you've finished your matches, you may qualify for some prizes, so be sure to check with the event coordinator to cash in on your winnings. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is go over some of the new and returning mechanics for the set, go over the themes associated with the draftable archetypes, and just give you a general rundown of what's going on in MH3 before I do my deck build, so we both have a better idea of what to look out for. The good news is, there are no new to Magic mechanics associated with MH3, but the bad news is that there are over 70 keyworded abilities returning to this set, and you can see a list of many of them on your screen now. Now, I obviously don't have time to go over every single mechanic here right now, but I'm going to highlight 5 of these mechanics as they are particularly important to the themes of the set. Kindred is a returning card type that used to be known as Tribal. For those of you that understand how Tribal works, Kindred functions the exact same way, it's just a new name is all. Kindred gives non-creature cards creature types. If a card allows you to search your library for an Eldrazi card, you could technically search for Echoes of Eternity, as it is an Eldrazi card. Umbra Armor is a new name for another returning mechanic that used to be known as Totem Armor. It functions the same way that Totem Armor did, it just has a new name. Umbra Armor appears on aura cards, and if a creature enchanted by an aura with Umbra Armor would be destroyed, instead you destroy the aura and all damage dealt to the creature is removed. Energy is returning in a big way in Modern Horizons 3, and it is a type of counter that players can have. There will be many ways in the set to get energy counters, as well as many ways to spend them for various benefits. Bestow is a keyword found on enchantment creatures that offer you a choice as you cast them. On one hand, you can cast them as an enchantment creature to get the effects of a new creature on the battlefield. On the other hand, you can cast them as an aura spell with Bestow, and if you did, it enchants a creature. Bestow solves the biggest downside of including auras in your deck in Limited in multiple ways. First, you could just have your aura act as a creature if you wanted to. Second, if you target a creature with the Bestow spell, and they kill your creature before it resolves, your bestowed aura simply enters as the enchantment creature. Also, if your bestow aura is attached to a creature and that creature leaves the battlefield, that bestow aura falls off and is then the enchantment creature printed on the card. And Modified is the most recent mechanic of these 5 debuting in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, and several cards in this set refer to modified creatures. A creature you control is modified if it has any number of counters on it, is equipped, and or is enchanted by an aura. Simple as that. When it comes to the archetypes, Modern Horizons 3 will feature the 10 limited archetypes you see on your screen now. Blue-white, red-white, and blue-red are 3 archetypes focused around acquiring and using energy. Cards like Inspired Inventor, Electrozoa, and Galvanic Discharge are examples of cards that help you store up some energy in your reserves, and some of these even pay you off and let you use that energy. But cards like Scurry of Gremlins, Riddlegate Gargoyle, and Izzet Generatorium are some of the gold cards in these colors that can pay you off for building up a nice energy storage. If you're in the Jeskai Wedge, you'll definitely want to keep an eye out for energy synergies. Green-white, white-black, and green-black are 3 archetypes that are concerned with modified creatures. These 3 colors offer plenty of ways to modify your creatures with things like +1/+1 counters and payoffs provided by cards like Fetid Gargantua, the Bestow mechanic with cards like Glyph Elemental, and Umbra Armor with cards like Lion Umbra, among many more ways that I haven't even mentioned. Building up all of these modified creatures will come with all sorts of payoffs as well, with cards like Cursed Wombat paying you off for putting +1/+1 counters on permanents you control, buffing your entire squad with cards like Golden Tail Trainer, and giving you enablers and payoffs in cards like Ondu Knotmaster. If you're in the Abzan Wedge, keep an eye out for ways to modify your creatures and find some payoffs for doing so. The Eldrazi are back in Modern Horizons 3, and blue-green and green-red are the colors you'll want to be focused in if you're thinking of drafting around some of these immensely popular creatures. Blue-green is specifically interested in ramping into some of the more expensive Eldrazi threats like Null Drifter, Twisted Riddlekeeper, and Breaker of Creation. You'll be able to use many of the ramp elements provided by green, as well as some of the Eldrazi spawn that green-red is most concerned with. These Eldrazi spawn are great sacrificed fodder in and of themselves, but can also sacrifice themselves to ramp out bigger threats. Red-green has a big concentration of these Eldrazi spawn with cards like Basking Broodscale, Path of Annihilation, and Writhing Chrysalis. Both of these green decks will look to cast big, scary Eldrazi spells, but may do so in slightly different ways. If you find yourself in the Teamer Wedge, have fun. Blue-black looks to be a classic control deck focused around drawing 3 cards in a turn for various benefits. Now, if you're drawing 3 cards a turn, you'll probably figure out a way to control the game enough to win in the late game anyway, but cards like Brain Surge, Eviscerator's Insight, and Horrid Shadow Spinner are ways to enable drawing 3 or more cards in a single turn, and cards like Sneaky Snacker, Tameo, Inquisitive Student, and Mindless Conscription are ways to pay you off for doing so. When you find yourself in blue-black, focus on building a good control deck, and drawing cards and getting paid off for doing so will likely be an easy thing to do. The last unique archetype in MH3 is red-black, which is an artifact affinity deck. This style of deck is usually immensely popular amongst the player base, especially more entrenched players, as it is very synergy-driven. Cranial Ram drives the artifact point home and looks to be a beast of an equipment card at common. Imskir Iron Eater has affinity for artifacts itself and also pays you off by drawing cards based on the number of artifacts you control, and Marionette Apprentice could be a fun way to slowly drain out your opponents by continually sacrificing your creatures and artifacts for value. These trinkety artifact decks are always a fun time, but also a little difficult to draft for less experienced players, as they do require very synergistic understandings of the format. Hopefully that rundown gives you a good idea of what's going on in the format. Now, the hardest part about the whole event is building your deck, but good news, I will now go through an entire Modern Horizons 3 sealed deck build to give you an idea of what you want to be looking for in your pool of cards and how to maximize your chance of having a competitive deck for the event. But before we do, if you do enjoy this content or any other content on the channel and would like to give back, I do have a Patreon with a link in both the description and on your screen now. For those of you that don't know, Patreon is a great way to give back to creators that provide you with content that you enjoy, and mine is no different, except for the fact that my Patreon is among the most affordable Patreons in the entire Magic community. I only have 2 tiers available for either $1 per month or $3 per month. Like, that's it. Less than a daily cup of coffee for a whole month. There's also absolutely no expectation of commitment either, as it is a come and go as you please system. You can support for 1 month and then discontinue and then rejoin later. It's completely up to you. Support on Patreon helps keep the lights on here at Daily Draft, and if you enjoy the content I make and would like to pay it forward, feel free to check it out and throw a couple bucks my way. Thanks so much for your consideration. Alright, here we are in deck building for Modern Horizons 3, and before we get going here, I will let you know that the place that I am building this deck in this interface right now is called sealeddeck.tech. That's the website. You can see a link down below for it as well. I generated this pool on draftsim.com, another link down below, so you can go ahead and see and practice yourself on how to do this. I just think that sealeddeck.tech offers a little bit more friendly of an interface when it comes to building these decks. DraftSim does a great job in generating the pools for you, so I just go ahead and export out of DraftSim and bring it right into sealeddeck.tech. So you can see we have a Modern Horizons 3 sealed pool generated before us, and if I was at my local pre-release, how do I start here? Well, the first thing I do is I make sure I sort by rarity. I cut it off on the top here, but there's a rarity button that you can sort by. And looky here, lucky us, we've got, what is this, 12? Yeah, 12 rares in our pool. Now, we have to see what our best ones are and if they're worth going towards. Let's see. We've got Kappa Cannoneer, which is, a card in Vintage Cube, which is pretty good. It's got Improvise, although blue isn't necessarily the artifact color in this set, but we'll see. Emerald Medallion, I don't think is very good. Disruptor Flute is basically unplayable. I'm also not going to go through every single card here and try to read them. That would just take far too long. So if you want to know what some of these cards do, you can look them up as I call them out here as well. Branching Evolution, I don't think is worth an entire card either. Kudo makes everything a bear, including your own stuff. Could be interesting. I doubt it's what we want to do here. Echoes of Eternity, I mean, maybe there's a big Eldrazi built around if you had some of the big Ulamongs and Kozileks and stuff like that. If you had a bunch of colorless cards. We do have a lot of devoid cards in this pool, I've seen. All these cards down here that have this interesting border here are devoid, which means they have no color. So whenever you cast a colorless spell, you get to copy those. So that could be interesting, but it is 6 mana with 3 colorless as well, which is very difficult to do. Got Invert Polarity, which is just kind of a hard to cast counterspell. But I do see Lelia the Blade Reforged here. With this, this card is also in the Vintage Cube and is quite powerful. We've got Arena of Glory, a rare land. Usually you don't want to see lands in your pools in the rare slot, but this one's pretty good. You can exert it to add double red mana, and exert means it just stays tapped for the next turn. And then if you cast a creature with that mana, it gains haste, which is kind of crazy. Velia, Exuberant Shepherd, kind of, blinks something if they go for a combat trick. You can always blink one of your own creatures, get a counter on it as well. On Velia, I mean. Guide of Souls is kind of a 1-drop in white that builds around energy. Red-white wants to build around energy in this set. And Pearl Ear Imperial Advisor, let's see, 3 mana, 3/4 lifelink, gives enchantment spells, Infinity for auras. Maybe we can make use of that, not exactly sure. So my first thought here is definitely try to fit Lelia into this deck if we can. We've got a couple good white rares as well as Arena of Glory. I don't really like these rares. We've got 12 rares, but honestly, they're not that good, including no mythics. So now I'm going to go ahead and sort by color up here. And one of the first things I see is we've got 5 copies of Fanged Flames in this deck. It's a 2-mana sorcery, deals 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker, and if it would die, exile it. So this is like Lava Coil that's devoid. 5 copies of it. I mean, that's pretty good, I think. Barbarian Ring could be interesting, especially if we're super aggressive as another land for us here. Big Eldrazi and Breaker of Creation. I don't think this one's that great. Ghost Fire Slice is an instant speed way to deal 4 damage to any target. What else do we got? Galvanic Discharge. We've got some energy build arounds here. I do see 2 Amped Raptors, which is an insane build around for energy. 2-drop in red here as well. 2 of them. We've got, what else do we got? Hex Gold Slith, 2 mana 2/1 energy build around. Inspired Inventor, 3 mana 2/2 that can give you some energy. So I'm noticing, oh look, also double Conduit Goblin here. And a Scurry of Gremlin. So my mind immediately goes to red-white here based on what I'm seeing. As far as the cards, we've also got a couple of MDFCs now. This cycle is super interesting because this effect, where the front side is a spell and the back side, ETB's tapped unless you pay 3 life, were mythics in Zendikar Rising. And here in Modern Horizons 3, they are now uncommons. These were very good mythic rares in Zendikar Rising, and now we've got them at uncommon. So they're probably like just free cards to put into our deck, I would think. We've also got a Blood-Soaked Insight, which we could cast in red-white. Cost 1 less to cast for each 1 life they lost this turn, so you can cast that in your second main if you deal them a bunch of damage for like red 1 or something, which would be pretty good. It's also just a dual land on the backside, which is fine if you need to hit a red land. What do we got in here? We already looked at all of our rares, so now we're just looking through commons and uncommons up here. ETB sacks creatures. Draw 2 cards. Breathe your last. Destroy, murder. Murder with upside nowadays. So this thing connives. 4 mana, 2/3 menace connives when it attacks. Not too bad. We've got more white creatures too. Nyxborn Unicorn is just a nice little bestow creature. Modular Kite does have living weapon, so this is a 1 mana 1/1 flyer that you can move around. Expel the Unworthy is kind of like a sorcery speed Swords to Plowshares. Kind of, a little bit, maybe. We do not have a lot of blue cards, like, at all. We have double Deem Inferior. Costs 1 less to cast for each card you've drawn this turn. You could bounce some things at sorcery speed. Double Tempest Harvester, which could be okay. Got a couple of Smelted Charge Bugs for energy build-arounds as well, so a couple of Disciple of PreReleases as well, which I think could be pretty good in green. Our green is not super deep at either. Lots of Fanged Flame, so my mind goes to red-white here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, just to cut out a little bit of time, I'm going to go ahead and build a red-white deck for you, and I'm going to make a cut so we can go through that together and then see where we're at from there. Alright, so after building a red-white deck out of my pool here of cards I think that were pretty worthy, I even had to make a couple of cuts, like Charge Bugs and Johnny and things like that as well. Johnny that Fells the Goldshire could be good. We already have so much removal. I've got all the Fanged Flames in here, 15 creatures. These are all MDFC lands, modal double-faced card lands, which means what we could do is actually play these two lands. This one doesn't enter tapped. This one most likely won't enter tapped either. We could run 15 lands plus 3 MDFC lands, which is kind of like 18. And if we start to flood out and we top deck something like Blood-Soaked Insight late in the game or something, we could just cast that. So I think running 15 lands plus 3 MDFCs in a pretty aggressive deck with all these 2-drops would be pretty good. I was able to fit in most of the rares I talked about. Lelia is in here. Pearl Ear, Guide of Souls. And we've got so many 2-drops, a double Conduit Goblin, double Amped Raptor. This is looking quite good, to be honest. I'm going to go ahead and give another deck a shot. Usually when you're building these kind of things, where your mind goes first is most of the time a decent choice. Trust your gut with these kind of things. There's a reason I was drawn to this deck with this pool. And there's a reason you would be drawn to the first deck you make with any pool as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just see what other options I have and potentially come back to this if the other option isn't too great. So the best option I could come up with is kind of a red-green deck here. I looked at black-green as well. We do have a Cursed Wombat. I just didn't really end up with quite enough playables. As you can see, we don't have a lot of green necessarily. And I have actually every single green card in my pool except for the Branching Evolution in this deck right now. It's still got all the Fanged Flames, Amped Raptors, Lelia, things like that in here with 15 lands and 5 MDFCs in this pool. But we're giving up on cards like Conduit Goblins, Scurry of Gremlins, you know, Pearl Ear, Guide of Souls over here, Velia. If we went with this red-green option, if we do go with the red-green, we're getting access to cards like Writhing Chrysalis, as well as Eldrazi Repurposer and Basking Brood Scale. These are good cards, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they're near as good as the red-white options that we have. So I'm pretty sure the deck I would go with here after kind of mulling over my options is going to be the red-white one, so I'll cut to that one again. Alright, I cut back to the red-white deck here. I did leave out the Barbarian Ring the second time. I just don't think this card's actually very good. On second glance here, it's not like it provides you any more than really a Mountain does necessarily, and I don't think we're going to have 7 or more cards in our graveyard particularly often, as we're not really building around that. So, hope this deck build kind of helped you out a little bit. It was a bit of an easier one. We kind of got lucky. Our rares weren't super great, so we had to rely a bit on synergy here, but I gotta say, opening 5 Fanged Flames makes red a little bit easier to do. Sometimes you end up with, you know, like we did, only 6 cards of a color or something, and it's just really hard to put things like that together. So sometimes your deck built itself for you, and we just got lucky that some of the cards that we got multiple copies of were actually pretty good. And we got a couple of gold cards for our archetype as well. And that is what I would run if I was playing in a pre-release tomorrow. Again, hope you guys found this portion of the video useful. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for sticking around until the end of this video if you're still here. I'm always excited for the release of this video because I know it'll be very beneficial to have all of this information in one place so that you have an easy way to find what you need if you wish to revisit the video throughout the week. If you enjoyed this content, feel free to share it with a friend or two, as there's a decent chance they might as well. If you're already subscribed to the channel, thanks for being here today, and if you're not, go ahead and click that subscribe button to stay on top of set review season and have access to consistent high quality drafts as soon as the set launches on Arena. Looks like that'll do it for this video, and I'll see you next time here at Daily Draft.